Hello, everyone, to the Space Careers Mastermind channel. I am Shumana Mukherjee, and this series is for interviewing the people who are real space professionals. These are the people who are either space scientists, engineers, or some kind of researcher in the field of space. And we are presenting this interview series for everyone who wants to build a career or pivot to a career in the field of space exploration. And to begin this interview series, I have a wonderful person as the first guest who has kindly agreed to come here for the interview with us today. She's a person who has inspired me since I've come across her work it, for many, many reasons. And we're going to explore those reasons today. Her name is Dr. Yulia Akisheva. She has just finished her doctorate in space radiation research. She is now also a freelance communicator and she's helping a lot of young people coaching them to build their careers in space. She's also the co-lead of the Diversity and Gender Equality Project Group at the Space Generation Advisory Council, for most of us in the space community, formerly known as SGAC. Thank you, Dr. Yulia, for being here today. We are very, very happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm super glad to be here. Thank you.
Great. So, where are you joining us from today? Could you please tell us that?
So I'm based in Toulouse in the south of France right now, and it's been 8 years since I moved here from my home in Sweden. So Toulouse.
Okay, great. And the first question that I really want to ask you is, how did this whole space journey start? I know you have a lot, you've already contributed a lot. Where did it begin? What was the educational journey like?
Yes, so I'd like to go back to the very beginning of all beginnings. So that would bring me back to Russia, to a beach, a deserted beach, and when I was watching stars in the night sky and I was mesmerized by it, really. Quite honestly, it started like that, and then I received a book, an encyclopedia about space, and I got just so excited about it, so interesting. But there wasn't really anything around my hometown where I could actually study this, and so well, pretty much never told anyone I was interested in this. And the first real thought of projecting myself onto the space sector was when I first got access to the internet when I was 11. And I Googled the very first, well, Google at that time, I searched for somebody who brings people to stars. I didn't know the right name for aerospace engineer. And even less did I know that I would end up becoming one. But again, since it was a hidden dream, nobody knew. And it was actually what 12 years, no, some 8 years later, at the end of my high school, when still nobody knew, and I had really good grades, and I went to speak to the career counselor. Actually, everybody had to, and honestly, that set me on this path towards space, because the lady asked me, "What do you want to do?" And I said something completely different, and she asked why, and I didn't have an answer. And then she asked, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I've always been interested in aerospace engineering." And then she said, "Well, you can do it. You can do it." And I didn't think I could, because I never projected myself really onto that. And then I applied to KTH, so the university in Stockholm in Sweden, at the Royal Institute of Technology, and I got selected. I only applied for that, actually. I put all of my bets into one basket, and then luckily got accepted. And then I told my mom and my family and everyone exploded with, how, where does space come from? Like, nobody thought, nobody knew. And then it exploded in my own head, in the sense that, I've been longing for space studies. So I just put myself on that aerospace track, aerospace engineering, as much as I could. And almost, well, by some chance, I started to look into doing a double degree in abroad, and specifically later in France, because I liked the language back in the day. And honestly, I didn't even know about Toulouse back then, to be honest with you. But because of the list of universities that my university had a contract with, I got to find out about Toulouse and ISAE-SUPAERO, where now I've spent the last 8 years, first as a student. So I came as a double degree student for aerospace engineering, and then I did lots of projects, maybe another couple of turning points or propelling points in my sort of career, let's say, would be a couple of projects that I did as a student at ISAE-SUPAERO, where I got to learn what is research, how do we work with the space agency. So these concrete projects really helped me to start to see what I like and what I don't maybe like so much. And then an internship that, as part of my program, I could do an internship, and one of them I did at the European Space Agency, and that was just such a dream come true, really, because back when I Googled the first time who brings people to stars, somehow the European Space Agency website popped up somehow, and I just had remembered that in my mind, and so it became a dream, and I thought it was unattainable. So when I got to do an internship there, of course, I was so happy, and it was a research internship, and it went well. I was really interested in that field. It was about Mars exploration. I was already interested about that, and then I thought that maybe research is for me because I enjoyed it so much. So that's when I started to put myself then on the track towards research and started to build these blocks, which I would later use to actually do my PhD. And towards the end of my studies, I started researching possibilities to do a PhD, and a lot of people are aware of the very straightforward way when when there is a proposal and you apply for it and you get selected and then you do a PhD for some years. And not too many people know that in engineering and aerospace engineering, you can actually propose your own research as well. And so that's what I did. In fact, I was interested in radiation protection of astronauts because I was interested in Mars exploration and human Mars exploration. And so I started talking to professors to see who would be interested. And honestly, it was a long ride. So if anyone is in the same shoes, don't be discouraged. For me, it took a year and a half to find a professor who was interested in this, even though, let's say, everyone told me the research project is interesting, but either people didn't have time or maybe funds or whatever, life is still in the way. So a year and a half later, I was still looking for somebody who would take on board my idea, and found this professor. Then went to pitch to a company here in Toulouse who supported my PhD, and I'm very happy for that. Drug tests and radiations. They wanted to develop their tool that I had previously been working with for a project before, and we wanted to apply it to deep space exploration. So that's how I brought them on board, and then together we applied for an ESA co-funded grant for supporting this PhD. So in the end, I had these three main entities behind this PhD, and that's how I could, let's say, propose my idea and then construct around it a PhD project, and then finally do it. So for me, these major steps were, first of all, well, the ignition, you see, the curiosity, but then I hid it away from everyone, and I decided I was not fit for it or something when I was very young. But then when I came back into it, then I went full speed, and then just try to grab as much as possible, like projects and research opportunities, and then finally put myself in the driver's seat, and then wanted to do what I'm most interested in, so human spaceflight, radiation protection. And so these are the steps, kind of from just imagining yourself as part of this field, and then gradually trying, and finally just going head on, and trying to make it happen.
The word that's coming to my head is unbelievable. I mean, talk about having no. We always say that you need to grow up in a conducive environment that teaches you how to, that inspires you, and you did literally everything from scratch by yourself. And right from that to your PhD studies, where you had to propose your own project and go through the entire proposal, it's incredible. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Now, my next curiosity is you got interested in space radiation, and for people who study physics, they know that particle physics is a different is a very difficult topic to study, and for engineers, it's even more challenging. For you to start your research in this field and to explore regolith as an option, because right from the Apollo days we have been hearing, okay, regolith is, it sticks to bodies, it's not good for this, but then suddenly we discover that, okay, regolith is a very good shield, it could be used as a great shield for radiation. So how did you arrive to this research question, because you had to propose your own research questions? How did you arrive at this point?
Mm. Yeah, so first of all, I was really interested in contributing towards Mars exploration, putting that human on Mars. Like that was just my dream, my love. And of course, when I started researching, looking into that, talking to people, quickly I realized that first we have to establish our presence on the moon, go to the moon, and then from there we can go to Mars. So then I fell in love with moon, let's say. And well, the biggest problem still is radiation protection of astronauts if we're talking deep space flight and long space flight, especially to Mars. So I thought, well, it's challenging, it's exciting, it's just let's go for it, let's see why we haven't solved it or how could I contribute or just let's learn about it. And I did first a master's degree thesis on that topic, on radiation protection topic, and then I got even more interested in all of this. And regolith came in the way because I thought, oh, that's an elegant solution. It's a smart solution to actually use something that's already there. Like if I, when I moved from Sweden to France, I came and I basically found a home here. I didn't bring my home with me. So similarly, it's smart to use local resources. And actually, around the time when I was making my proposals, in situ resource utilization as a field was very well, I felt it was everywhere, at least like in Europe in that moment of time. A lot of startups were popping up. The European Space Agency was interested in this research. I saw a lot of conferences covering this topic, and I thought, wow, this is exciting. There's a lot of dynamic in this field. And then I started just looking closely into it, and the regolith became a friend of mine almost. But it is a very peculiar, interesting, difficult material. And actually, as I was preparing for my PhD, in my mind, I decided to take a third master's degree in material sciences because I thought that if I'm going to work with habitat construction, because I want to really contribute to that deep space human exploration. So I need to know how to build habitats, and if we're going to do it sustainably, we got to use regolith. So then I thought, okay, I got to know a little bit more about materials in general. So that's why I went to that extra step. And actually, as with the materials background, it is an interesting material in terms of what it can offer to us from thermal protection, radiation protection, and even from operations like operability. It's hard to manipulate. It's what you said before. It sticks to, well, anything really. And then it would be a problem if we got it in contact with people directly. So how to protect people from radiation and thermal hazards, but also how to protect people from regolith itself. So it's a very interesting, complex topic. And basically, I was just excited, really. I was just, wow, it's interesting, like how come we still don't have a solution? I want to at least contribute something or learn about it. And it was kind of like that, but also, of course, a lot of research in the background. I did read a lot and talk to people. I got lucky when I had my internship at ESA. One of the major reasons I really loved my time there is because I had the opportunity to actually go talk to a lot of experts, a lot of people who were open, even to grab a coffee and talk about these kind of things. And that gave me a lot of insights, and I felt like really this is exciting.
It's wonderful. I mean, the fact that it's not just liking one topic. I mean, it's very easy to get fascinated in space. We find, but to find that one specialization and okay, backing it up with the research that you did, with the kind of education that you supported it, and one very important thing you said that you went to experts and talked to them about it. That's like a very important foundation for anyone, not just I would say in research, especially in research, but in any field that is so complex. So that's a brilliant thing that you shared. And now if we talk about, this is more like a very personal interest, because during my master studies also I was involved in almost the exact topic of research, and it was quite challenging to do the radiation modeling, to build those strategies. Okay, how do you use regolith? Do you just use it just as regolith, or do you combine it to other materials? So what I would really like to know is, during your research, how did you develop these strategies? What kind of tools or what kind of methodologies did you use?
Yeah. So as you say, it's a multidisciplinary problem. So then you have to see in your head, either make a mind map or somehow visualize it, that the different disciplines are going to interfere with each other, and maybe what is going to influence the others sort of more in terms of, I mean, my radiation protection was at the core of the topic, and I wanted to, let's say, solve the radiation problem, but of course it's impossible to solve it, but to propose a solution, right? And let's say we fix the radiation, even though it's already way harder than just to say that. But then the solution that we propose for radiation would impose certain other, let's say, implications for the design, for thermal protection, and for using regolith itself. As you said, do we use it just as it is, or do we add some materials into it? How do we add it? Do we add it in multi-layer structures, or do we add it into the regolith and make a new material and then mix it and put it in a mold and make some bricks, or do we 3D print it? So in terms of methodology, yes, I went by one simple sort of defining rule for me. As an aerospace engineer by background, I wanted my solution, my proposal to be feasible and feasible soon. So that's why I looked at TRL of the proposed technology readiness level of available technologies with using regolith, state of art on what kind of regolith simulants we have, even because we don't use the real regolith from the moon when we do our analysis. So, and every time going towards my research question, my main research question of how we can use regolith to shield astronauts from galactic cosmic rays and solar particle events, and maybe what other materials we can also play with and how to use them as well, I was always looking at this feasibility aspect. Can we do it soon? Because I want to go to the moon tomorrow. So that way, when I was constructing the first, let's say, first stage of research, what am I going to look at more in detail? I was throwing out certain solutions, certain proposals that, according to my criteria of feasibility that I applied to my research, were not yet there. So then maybe we will investigate that later. But right now, I'm going to throw out certain certain options. So, for example, I was not looking into using regolith with 3D printing, because today the technology readiness of that, specifically using regolith, real regolith, is very low. And I really wanted to do something soon. And then also looking at what's happening around me in my surroundings, so in the lab or in France or in Europe in general. So where are we going as a sector, what we're looking at? And for example, different sintering techniques, what's out there, how much did we research? And depending on what techniques are, let's say, well proposed, well researched, what can I add with my regolith for radiation protection perspective? For example, that's how I found one of my main sub-research questions. When I looked at literature, a lot of people are suggesting using polymers, geopolymers, to add into regolith, to mix it up, and then make bricks, because they will actually basically hold the regolith together, and then we can make bricks. And if we use a mold or an oven. And I said, okay, great. And then most of this literature was citing how it's also going to be beneficial for radiation protection, but without actually providing insight as to how and why and how much. So that's when I was thinking, well, if nobody did it, let me see actually how much of this polymer polyethylene we need to really start to say that we are adding radiation protection. And it turned out that it's actually not as straightforward. Sometimes things get worse. Sometimes things get better. And I think that with this little project as part of my PhD, I've added little value in terms of, well, now we know how much polymer we need to add to actually claim that we're adding radiation protection. And then from then on, we can look back and see, is this actually in situ resource utilization? At what stage do we begin to say that it's in situ resource utilization? Like, how much material do we use from the ground and how much do we bring, so that it's still mostly using in situ resources? So basically, to summarize in terms of methodology, of course, it's always adding value that it answers specifically my big research question. But my, let's say, rule was that feasibility aspect, this engineering aspect, that we can actually do it. Similarly, for example, there are other solutions for radiation protection purely that could work, like putting a water wall or liquid hydrogen or nanomaterials, which are really good at radiation protection. But again, the TRL of those solutions are low, or it's not feasible easily from the engineering and operational perspective. And that's why some of these options, let's say, I omitted in my research.
This is actually, these are the two aspects that I really loved about your PhD defense. It's that first thing we were talking about the solutions that are immediately feasible. If not immediately, I mean, but it's doable. The TRL is quite high for them. You did not go into very imaginary topics that might be possible after a decade or so. But right now, you're talking about the solutions that need more investigation for it to be executed on moon. That's what I loved. And the second thing is, I remember we're presenting the different thickness levels and the combinations of the polymers, how much contribution of regolith is going to go. And you're saying, okay, add more, but it gets worse. The result gets worse. And that was one beautiful thing I noticed because it's very hard to find this in literature for this particular field of study. So, quite related to that, I want to ask you, uh, there is always these kind of different speculations that maybe why put so much effort into building shieldings on habitats on the surface of the moon when we have such big lava tubes both on Mars and Moon, where we know that the astronauts could go underground and that would help them shield them from the radiation and micrometeoroids. So, what is your stance on that? What do you think about the pros and cons of these solutions?
Yeah. First, let me say it would be poetic to live in caves as we came out of caves on Earth at some point as well. But if we're talking strictly from, let's say, again, engineering point of view, well, right now we just don't yet know enough about the lava tubes in terms of their safety factors and the cartography of the lava tubes. But let's say we know that once. Let's say that they're safe. Then myself, I did a couple of calculations from the radiation protection point of view, and I've seen that under about 5-6 meters of regolith, so when the lava tube goes down and we have, let's say, a roof of 5-6 meters, we get to very comfortable exposure levels. So that would be brilliant in terms of just purely radiation protection solution, yeah? And this way, I agree, this far, this long. But then, if we take into account also why we're going to the moon, who is going to the moon, and what are going to do there. So, why right now it's for scientific exploration purposes. Astronauts are going there for a long time. And what are they going to do? They're going to do a lot of exploration, scientific experiments. A lot of it is going to be on the surface. So, they will have to get access to the surface again. So then we are talking about building essentially a double infrastructure under the ground and on the surface again, because we can't leave astronauts without a shelter in case of an emergency, because we don't know yet how long it would take to go down into the lava tubes, etc. So we would have to have double infrastructure. We would still have to build something. Maybe it would be a shelter instead of a full-on long-term habitat, but we still have to build life support systems, provide power, etc., etc. So that double infrastructure right now, it's something that puts this feasibility further away from my vision. And as I'm very attached to it, I would say that today, since we still have so many unknowns, it would be much more feasible, straightforward to go and establish a presence on the surface. Also, complete all the exploration and scientific purposes on the surface of the moon. And then eventually, maybe we could go down into the lava tubes and maybe build a more permanent presence there, settlement there, so that we could use then the first structures that we've built on the surface, and then all over time also kind of go dive deeper. So this is my perspective. It's just that from the radiation point of view, it would be great, but if we take into account other things, also, let's say, providing light infrastructure, power infrastructure under the ground. So this complexifies things, and we don't know yet enough, maybe, collectively, to actually be sure about the solution. So my vision is like, let's say, twofold, two steps.
That makes a lot of sense. Yes, of course. I mean, we are at a stage when we have not yet been there. I mean, even the first missions of Artemis are going to be a few weeks or a couple of months, and there are too many unknown variables to control. And radiation still is one of the biggest challenges that every space mission that they're facing. Another big challenge in the space domain, or I can say aerospace industry, that you are uh, helping pioneers to solve this issue is what you do at SGSE. the Our Giant Leap project. And I was very fortunate last year for a very short amount of time. I was involved in one of the Divinas project. And it was, I must say, it's not just your leadership, of course, you're the reason all the people have come together, but the way all the projects are being carried out, the way the team members are contributing, it's a totally different environment. It's a very inspiring, very uh, motivating environment for people, especially coming from countries, from the developing countries, and of course, as women. It's just a lot of factors working there in the favor of those projects. So, what is the overall goal of Our Giant Leap right now? What are you aiming for with the team?
Yeah, thank you for bringing it up. It's a project that's very close to heart and forever will be, I think. And I mean, the goal really stayed the same as since the very first day in terms of the global goal is, well, simply put, embrace diversity, facilitate inclusion in the sector, and showcase how the sector can serve to actually improve diversity, inclusion, equity, and equality on Earth as well. So both for the sector in the sector, but also from the sector to Earth. And when I say it fully, it's a big, big project and big goal. And then actually what makes it even more important and meaningful is that we don't just do it, well, I don't want to say to do it, but we do it, we want to do it in a holistic way, in a meaningful way, taking into account different situations around the world. The space sector is not at the same level everywhere. People don't come at it towards it from the same perspective with the same vision and the same cultural and etc. all kinds of backgrounds. So what I love the most about the team and how we're doing our work is that we're really trying to take this perspective of multicultural and internationality of the sector in our work. And so whatever we produce, well, hopefully, and so far it has been, is actually applicable to many people and many entities, and actually giving this holistic approach. So that's why it becomes more complicated for us and complex to work on it. So it's not just let's bring more people into the sector or let's talk about having more women in the sector. No, it's solving concrete problems, or at least addressing them, bringing awareness, breaking up stereotypes, proposing tools that the sector can implement in their entities, which is one of the main strengths of this group, actually, that we are working with different partners of SGC and Our Giant Leap to actually instill these recommendations and these tools that we find, that we work on, research, etc. And of course, radiate about the topic and the work that you have done with Divinas, for example, on the, well, one of the two topics, the astronaut profile, how it's changed in the history, for example. These things that people don't pay enough attention to maybe in our sector. So giving this its rightful place. And hopefully, if we project ourselves onto, let's say, future, we try to do that already now, but I hope that through this project and through our involvement and activities, we will manage to have that diversity and equality, equity, inclusion issues are not shoved to the side, but that actually, let's say, our engineering problems are solved through the prism of diversity as well. Because right now we're still in this situation where diversity work and all of that is shoved a little bit to the corner. Even if you look at conferences, there's maybe maximum one day of diversity or one panel. There is very little attention paid in research to these factors as well. For example, with my first paper, I even faced some difficulty publishing a scientific paper when I included the female astronaut sex into the proposal of what research needs to be focusing on because of the radiation issues, you know, with male and female. Even such things are not being paid attention to. And so I want that diversity becomes central, you know, or everywhere and not just shoved to the side. So, and I feel like the team wants that kind of sector, to have that kind of sector as well. So and then one final thing I add on my personal perspective with the whole project and the starting it, leading it so far, actually I realized I changed my own perspective, that it's actually all about one person at a time. It's one person at a time who comes to Our Giant Leap, works, who then talks to other people, who has an impact on other people, our partners that we work with, That's how we inflict this transformational change that will actually stay for a long time. So that's why I've become much more patient with it than I used to be. At the beginning, I wanted to change the world immediately. But now I'm much more patient with it because I can actually see that when we do it in this holistic approach and we really make an impact one person at a time, yes, it will take a long time, but it will be more meaningful and more, let's say, thorough, like a cultural transformational change that takes time.
Yeah, it's very nicely that you put it that kind of all space conferences or all kind of space discussion sometimes becomes so technical that these are also important. These are the issues that are very integral to even technical development of space missions. And sometimes people forget that. And there's one beautiful thing about your entire project group is that you realize even if you come from the, let's say, just in the sense of space, even if you come from a minority group, you will realize that it's not that even people coming from seemingly more privileged countries have so much of representation too. It's not like that. There are
Mm.
disparities in all kinds of sense. That's why, and I see kind of a similarity uh, in the approaches that you took for your PhD as well as in this, that you are looking to actually find solutions. That maybe that's an engineer's mindset that's
Mm.
plain that, okay, I know I found that problem, but find a solution to it instead of making a 30-year plan to framework to, that it will happen. So that's really, that's one of the big factors that inspires me about your work. And the last thing I would really want to ask you is space, it just seems like many people ask me, you work in space, okay, why don't you just go to any space organization and apply? It doesn't work like that. I mean, it sounds like one field of study, but it's probably the most multidisciplinary field of study. So for anyone, be it a fresh graduate or someone who's already has some experience but wants to switch to space, what kind of advice would you give them if they really want to find that major or that kind of specialization? Because without that, it's kind of, they're all over the place. What would you say to them?
Well, first thing, actually, learn from my mistake of hiding this interest for a long time. So don't shy away from your own interest and this perception that project yourself onto the space sector. But then it won't be enough. It's just the first step. Don't be too shy and don't hide. And then talk to people, talk to people who are in the sector to see what they say about it, what they say about their work, how their work is, etc. This is now easier with the global connectivity and also, let's say, LinkedIn, etc. searches with such associations as what you're leading, actually, pushing people together to talk about these things to help people find their own path. Yeah. Personally, I think to find your own path is you have to put try put your hands on different projects and try it out, right? In terms of the field of study, I started with Mars and I just wanted to contribute to human exploration of Mars. I end up learning all about lunar regolith, right? And radiation protection. There is a gap, but it's still contributing to this big idea of human space exploration. And I only could bridge this gap because I first went for Mars and really exploring Mars just, and then other projects in human spaceflight, etc., etc., gradually moving to the moon. So my suggestion would be try to participate in different projects and competitions. A lot of these are open to all nationalities. A lot of these are hosted online nowadays, so they are more and more accessible. And a lot of that is also free. So because that's also part of course, consideration for many people. If it's possible, try to study abroad, try to have this exposure to other environments, other study systems. Because I was honestly lucky to see 3 study systems in my life and also different ways that research is done in different countries. So that's also important, I think. But then sometimes that does not depend entirely on you. But this proactiveness to talk to people, to do projects, that should be accessible to most people. And just to give an example, when I hit a very hard time in my PhD in the second year, a lot of things were not going my way. And I was honestly losing a lot of time. And I just was desperate, honestly. What I did is that I stumbled upon this person's event, and I thought it was an online event, and I really admire this person and her research, and she's very prominent in the field of radiation protection. And I was like, I'm gonna go, but I realized that it was in Australia later, and it was an in-person event, and I was really upset. And then out of that desperation, upsetness, I just decided, let me write to her, and I wrote a long letter explaining what I do. I just want to exchange with her, and just once, and it replied almost immediately. Sounds very great. Let's meet up. It happened to be her own sort of pet project, Mars human exploration. She loves to do that, and she wanted to help me out. And she became a co-supervisor of my PhD later. And that's how I got the University of Wollongong to also participate in my research, support my research. And we're working now, actually, still, we're preparing an experiment together in a particle accelerator. So that was really so simple in a way. I just wrote to a person I really aspire to admire, and I wanted to just have an exchange, and it now led to all this collaboration, even going beyond my PhD. And that was only just writing an email. So again, it is possible to find people who will talk to you and will help you out. Remember also, the full story is that first it took me a year and a half to find even a professor who would take on board my research. So of course, sometimes it will take time, but other times you'll win a lottery, you'll meet the right person, and just see for yourself if it's possible, if you are interested in that, and then you can try it out.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Yulia. I mean, it has been wonderful listening to not just your journey, but your approach, the way you're approaching. That's one crucial skill that everyone in space should have. It's a new complex industry, new complex field of study. So everything you share, I'm sure it's going to be very, very valuable to everyone watching. I'm quite privileged that you came as the first guest, and you shared all your experiences with us here. And thank you for that. Thank you for adding value to our understanding of space professions. It's still I always say it's like a very complex maze that we are navigating. We see rockets, we see satellites, we see this, that. So thanks for providing a lot of clarity. And to everyone watching, I would like to say that I hope you learned something. Please let us know in the comments what was the most interesting thing that you learned from Dr. Yulia. And like she said, don't be afraid to reach out, to talk to people. That's one of the most valuable resources and skills that you would develop. And if you want to join our mastermind community where we speak much more in depth about different space technology concepts, then I will send you the link in the comments. Feel free to join. And wish you a wonderful day. And thanks again, Dr. Yulia.
Thank you, Shumana. Thank you for the work that you're doing, for everyone watching. And just, well, I would like to wish everyone good luck with their search and with their journey. Space is fun, so I hope it just continues to be fun for everyone. And we are working to make it better in inclusiveness and diversity. But in itself, space is fun. And again, thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.